Shots fired in the workplace. The last sound you'd expect to hear.
The odds of being involved in a situation like this are similar to your chances of being struck by lightning.
It's a strange thing about lightning, though. We use it as a way to describe something that seemingly has no chance of happening. But how many of us would stand next to a metal pole during a thunderstorm? I'm Randy Spivey.
And I'm Jim Sporleader, both from the Center for Personal Protection and Safety. The possibility of being involved in an active shooter situation is very remote, but the consequences are so potentially catastrophic that it makes good sense for you to spend some time thinking and preparing for it.
Active shooter used to be a phrase used only by law enforcement. But as these events have spread, it's something people in all types of organizations have had to learn about and prepare for, even in hospitals and other healthcare facilities, places that used to be considered safe havens.
Violence in healthcare is really on the rise. We want to protect the caregivers and our patients at all costs.
It is not a safe haven. It can happen anywhere. Anywhere that there's human congregation and activity, there can be violence.
Security can vary significantly from one healthcare setting to the next. Size, location, and budgetary issues can all have an impact. But even in hospitals with a large and well-trained security department, there still exist vulnerabilities.
There's not enough security people to protect the entire hospital.
They can't be everywhere. They're not at every door.
To be clear, we're not asking you to take on new and additional responsibilities. The fact is, an active shooter event is an extreme situation, one that requires everyone involved to be a stakeholder in their own survival.
You're part of that team. You're part of that response. You're part of the whole process.
This is especially true during what we call the extreme danger gap, that period of time between the onset of extreme violence and the arrival of law enforcement.
It's critical to understand that in the extreme danger gap, anything you do or don't do could have life-threatening consequences. That's why thinking in advance about what your options are is so important.
This is especially true for healthcare professionals. You embrace a duty of care commitment that compels you to be more than just a survivor, but a protector as well.
There are many things you can do to survive and protect others during an active shooter incident. The most effective option starts right now with developing a survivor-protector mindset.
In the healthcare environment, every team member, every employee needs to be empowered. They need to realize that they are not only a survivor, but a survivor-protector.
The survivor-protector mindset is what we learn and nurture when we train for the unthinkable. It includes the willingness to accept the possibility that we could find ourselves in a life-threatening situation with split-second choices to make.
It's having the life-saving practical sense to think through those choices now, when you're not in danger, and when you can ask the what-if questions.
Training, planning, and rehearsing ahead of time will enhance your sense of control in a chaotic situation and strengthen your commitment to both survive and protect.
You and your colleagues train to deal with life and death situations already. You have protocols. In some ways, preparing for the possibility of an active shooter is no different than preparing to deal with a fire.
We train, we look at race and pass, and what would I do if that horrific thing ever occurred? And it's very similar.
I am paying more attention to each room that I work in and each area so that I can look at where I think things might happen. Pay attention to which room's locked, which ones don't.
Research shows there are important differences between the reactions of people who've been trained to face stressful, life-threatening situations and those who have not.
In most cases, the first response is the same in both groups: startle and disbelief. Even trained individuals are likely to feel disbelief when they suddenly find themselves in a potentially life-threatening situation.
And it's natural to feel fear as well, regardless of how well trained you are. But getting through that initial disbelief and fear and into assessment and action is the key to survival.
Trained individuals are better prepared to do that. Untrained individuals are likely to remain in disbelief.
Remember, this is the time you're in the extreme danger gap, a time when seconds can make a life and death difference. And it's a time when the gap between trained and untrained gets wider.
Trained individuals begin to recall what they've learned, thought about, and rehearsed. Untrained individuals simply react and are likely to sink into denial. This can't be happening to me.
Trained individuals consider options and prepare to act just as they've rehearsed. Untrained individuals may descend into a state of helplessness, some literally frozen in fear.
Freezing is the most unproductive human response there is. We don't want our staff to freeze. So part of this whole program is to give people options and to get them to think about what they can do as opposed to becoming so fearful that they do nothing and become a victim.
The key to successfully responding as a trained individual is thinking about it in advance. Watching this program is an important first step, but to be really prepared, you'll need to do a bit more.
It's important you also spend some time going through the what-ifs that apply to your specific work area, ideally with the other individuals you work with. And be sure to become familiar with your organization's policies and procedures as related to this kind of situation.
Active shooter events are highly dynamic. They're usually over quickly and can happen anywhere. But there are some basic actions that successful survivor protectors take. We call them the 4 A's: accept, assess, act, and alert.
First, it's important that you accept the situation you find yourself in is real and actually happening. Often, survivors of active shooter incidents report that the sounds they heard didn't sound like gunshots, probably because real gunshots don't sound like the ones we hear in movies and TV shows. When in doubt, act as if it's real.
And if you have visual confirmation, try hard not to freeze in shock. A firearm in your workplace will be a startling sight. Accept what you see and work to move through your disbelief.
The second A is for assess. Assess the situation. What's going on? Where's the shooter? These are questions you should continue to ask because the situation will likely change second by second.
The third A is act. You basically have 3 options: avoid, barricade, or fight.
Avoid simply means to get as far away from the shooter as you can, especially if it means you'll be able to get help. Barricade includes any action that might keep the shooter from reaching you, like hiding in a room and locking or blocking the door. As a last resort, fight only applies if you find yourself face to face with the shooter and with no way to avoid or barricade.
The fourth A is for alert. Be sure to call the appropriate emergency response number. If your facility has panic buttons or silent alarms, use them as quickly as possible. Accept, assess, act, and alert.
Those critical seconds of being able to know that, all right, these are the 4 things, I need to make sure I do those. That's critical.
This is a circle. It's a continual circle because when there's a deadly event or deadly assault going on, whatever we call it, whatever we define it, it's dynamic and it's going to move fast. We know that.
Now find Dr. Meyer.
Oh my God, he's got a gun.
Those first few seconds could mean life or death for you and those individuals under your care.
In all cases, the goal is to survive and protect, but your options will depend on how close you are to the shooter.
If you hear a code or emergency announcement over the PA system, and it appears the danger is relatively far away, you'll still need to take immediate steps to protect your patients and yourself.
Be sure to know what the procedures are for your area and follow them immediately.
Obviously, the greatest level of threat is if the shooter is in your immediate proximity, especially if he's visible. In this situation, your previous training and rehearsal will be vital.
In an instant, you'll need to assess how best to balance your roles as survivor and protector. Are you alone, or are there others close to you? What's their mobility, and can they help you and themselves? Are you near patient rooms? Do you know which rooms can be locked from the inside?
If you're in imminent danger, your actions need to be immediate. If there are people you can guide to safety while also taking shelter yourself, do so quickly and with authority.
Patient rooms are often equipped with fire doors that may offer protection. Bathrooms, which can be locked, might also be a good place to shelter those who can enter quickly.
Any other room that can be locked is also a potential shelter. If there are interior windows, be sure to block them if you can and turn out the lights to make the room appear unoccupied.
In patient rooms, beds can be used as barricades with the brakes locked. And though you'll want to move a patient away from the door, the first priority should be to barricade.
You know what? Obviously, the most dangerous situation is if the shooter is in your immediate area and you have no direct means to avoid or barricade.
If you're trapped in an open area with no real hiding options and no means of exit, try to put something, anything, between yourself and the shooter.
If there are 2 or more of you, resist the urge to huddle together. Instead, try to spread out and make a plan to act as a team to overcome the shooter if necessary.
Most rooms are full of things that can be effective tools for defense.
Anything that's hard that can create, you can hit the individual with. Whatever it takes, throw something in their face. A powder fire extinguisher. You can take a powder fire extinguisher off the wall and spray powder in their face from 20 feet away.
Directly confronting the shooter is a critical decision only you can make.
I cannot tell you to fight, but if you make that decision, you're fighting for your life and the life of others, and you do whatever it takes to neutralize that individual, to stop that person.
Yelling and throwing things can startle, distract, impair, or even injure your attacker. And remember too that he's only fully armed while he still has the use of his hands. He may have the gun, but if you control his hands, he won't be able to use it.
It's important for you to be aware of a type of incident that's similar to an active shooter event, namely a hostage-taking situation. The hostage-taker wants to use people as leverage to achieve a goal. This is very different than the active shooter, who is simply there to take lives.
If you find yourself in a hostage situation, remain calm, follow directions, and wait for authorities to resolve the situation. Try not to say anything confrontational or aggressive. Historically, the vast majority of hostage incidents are resolved through negotiations, and they end peacefully.
But the situation could change and become an active shooter incident. That's why it's so important to keep assessing the situation moment by moment.
The extreme danger gap ends when law enforcement arrives. But it's still a very dangerous situation until they succeed in ending the violence. And it's important to be aware that they'll have no way of knowing immediately whether or not you're a threat, even if you're wearing scrubs or a uniform.
When officers arrive, be prepared to calmly, quickly, and accurately tell them what they need to know. The location of the shooter, number of shooters if there's more than one, description of the shooter, and the number and kinds of weapons he has.
The officers have been taught that hands kill, so show your hands and follow their instructions.
We're not going to necessarily be friendly. If we ask you questions, respond as concise and quickly as possible and do what we tell you to do. Because the more time we spend with you, the less time we're going to be able to go and handle the threat and save other people's lives that could possibly be in danger.
We spend less time with them and we go straight up to the target.
Active shooter incidents are low probability, high impact events. But thinking about it now, when you're not in the middle of a crisis, is key in preparing to survive it.
Survivor protectors take charge and respond with rehearsed options that bridge the extreme danger gap. They ask the what-if questions and rehearse with coworkers on how to respond.
Survivor protectors know the 4 A's. They accept they're in an active shooter situation. They assess the level of threat moment by moment. They act with confidence and commitment, and alert authorities and others in danger.
Shots fired in your workspace, a situation you hope never to face.
But with awareness and rehearsal, you can survive and protect.